In 1905, on 6th Avenue between 43rd and 44th Streets, two men who had made their fortune selling fantasy to the working class opened the largest theater on earth. It seated 5,300 people, nearly twice the capacity of the Metropolitan Opera. Its stage was 100 feet wide and 200 feet deep, 12 times the size of any legitimate house on Broadway. Beneath that stage sat a 14-foot-deep, 60-foot-wide glass water tank that could be raised by hydraulics into full view of the audience. And underneath the tank, in the basement, elephants stood in stalls, waiting. The building permit filed in 1904 listed the construction cost at $400,000. That number was a fiction, the first of many. The real cost was far higher, and the men behind it, Frederick Thompson and Elmer "Skip" Dundee, had a long history of spending other people's money on spectacles that shouldn't have worked but did. 2 years earlier, they had opened Luna Park on Coney Island, a 22-acre delirium of towers, rides, canals, and electric light, financed with $700,000 they had borrowed from anyone who would listen. Luna Park made them rich. The Hippodrome was supposed to make them immortal. Thompson was an architect from Ohio, trained at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, with a gift for designing buildings that looked like hallucinations. He was in his early 30s. He had once proclaimed himself the toy maker of New York, and he meant it without irony. Dundee, born in Omaha in 1862, the son of a federal judge appointed by Abraham Lincoln, was everything Thompson wasn't: bald, stuttering, shrewd with a ledger. He once removed his toupee mid-pitch to disarm a skeptical investor. They had met at the Trans-Mississippi Exposition in Omaha in 1898, where Dundee pirated one of Thompson's ride designs and outmaneuvered him for a midway concession. Thompson, more baffled than angry, proposed a partnership. Their talents, he figured, were better used in combination than in competition. He was right about that, if about little else involving money. Together, they had the money man Harry S. Black of U.S. Realty behind them, and the Fuller Construction Company doing the actual building, and an architect of record named J.H. Morgan, who was otherwise known mainly for designing stables and tenements. Construction began in June 1904 on the site of the 6th Avenue car stables, on the edge of the theater district, 1 block from the recently renamed Times Square. The exterior of what they built was a Roman Renaissance facade of red brick and ornamental terracotta, topped by 2 towers, each capped with a globe covered in electric lights. 2 blocks south, the cornerstone for the New York Public Library had just been laid, though the building wouldn't open for another 6 years. 3 blocks east, Grand Central Station was still receiving trains on the New York Central line, not yet rebuilt into the marble edifice with the cerulean ceiling. The Hippodrome opened into a city that was still becoming the city. To compete with the roar of the 6th Avenue elevated train, the building had to be its own spectacle before anyone bought a ticket. On opening night, April 12, 1905, a proscenium box sold at auction for $575, around $20,000 today. The cheapest seat in the family circle cost a quarter. Frederick Vanderbilt was in the audience. So was Harry Payne Whitney. So was the architect Stanford White, who had less than a year to live. The show ran 4 hours. The first act was called A Yankee Circus on Mars, a narrative that defied description. The King of Mars buys a bankrupt New England circus, and what followed involved spaceships, horses, acrobats, a baboon named Coco, an orchestra of 150 dancers performing Ponchielli's Dance of the Hours, and a clown from Spain named Marceline, who walked on stage in an ill-fitting evening suit and did nothing particularly fast or loud, and became the most famous performer in the building. The second act was called Andersonville, a recreation of the Union cavalry raid on the Confederate prison camp. Soldiers on horseback charged across a bridge, fired rifles, dodged explosions, and then rode their horses directly into the water tank, which had been raised to simulate a mountain lake. The cast for that single evening numbered 1,200. A man from out west told a reporter from the New York Times, "I have never seed nothing as big as this out Walla Walla ways. That tank, it comes back." Thompson and Dundee charged low prices because the math, in theory, was simple. Pack 5,300 seats 14 times a week, and even a 25-cent ticket generates a fortune. The first year, 14,000 people walked through the doors every day. A critic in Ainsley's magazine wrote that the Hippodrome would have put the Roman Colosseum out of business. Success magazine that same year offered a correction. The enterprise cost $30,000 a week to operate, and every experienced showman in America knew from the start that no theater in New York could find a large enough year-round audience to sustain it. Both were right. The building's scale was its engine and its disease. A stage that could hold 1,000 performers required 1,000 performers. The stalls beneath the stage required feed and handlers and veterinarians and insurance. The water tank required plumbing that ran through the building's bones. Every spectacle demanded more spectacle. Thompson and Dundee had built an appetite, not a business. And then, on February 5, 1907, Dundee died. Pneumonia. He was 44. He had spoken with Thompson 2 hours before his heart gave out. The doctors had been certain he would recover. Thompson, without his partner's restraint, began to unravel. He married the actress Mabel Taliaferro in 1906 and poured money into managing her career, producing plays, taking lavish vacations. He lost control of Luna Park to creditors in 1912 and declared bankruptcy at the age of 39. His assets, which had once totaled $1.5 million, were gone. He remarried, tried once more at the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition in San Francisco with a ride called the Grand Toyland, and found that the public now wanted to ride airplanes. He died on June 6, 1919, of Bright's disease and alcoholism at 45. By then, the Hippodrome had been out of his hands for over a decade. The Schubert organization had acquired the theater in 1909. They kept the spectacles running because that's what the building required, but the Schuberts understood what Thompson had not. The Hippodrome was structurally incapable of turning a reliable profit. Production costs approached $40,000 a week during a 40-week season. The building devoured every dollar it earned and asked for more. The Hippodrome was more than a theater, though. Blue laws banned theatrical performances on Sundays, so organizations rented the space for rallies and fundraisers. On December 5, 1909, Alva Vanderbilt Belmont, a mobile Alabama socialite who had leveraged her enormous fortune into the women's suffrage movement, filled the Hippodrome with supporters of striking shirtwaist blouse makers. The 1909 strike, known as the Uprising of the 20,000, was led primarily by young Jewish women. They had been harassed and beaten by police. The Hippodrome's 5,300 seats gave the movement a stage that matched its scale. That was what the building did best. It made whatever happened inside it feel historic, whether it was a cavalry charge into a water tank or a labor rally in a theater built for elephants. In 1915, Charles Dillingham took over. Dillingham was a Broadway producer with instincts suited to the Hippodrome's appetite. He staged lavish extravaganzas with 500-member choruses, circus animals, and diving horses. He brought in John Philip Sousa, who composed a march called the New York Hippodrome to commemorate his run in the show Hip Hip Hooray. He brought in the Australian swimmer Annette Kellerman, who performed a water ballet in the glass tank, 200 mermaids behind her. The finale, a high dive over a waterfall cascading around the stage. Kellerman was paid $2,000 a week. She had overcome childhood leg braces through swimming, had been arrested in Boston for wearing a one-piece bathing suit on a public beach, had appeared nude in a motion picture. Now she was in the tank, 60 feet of hydraulically raised glass, doing things in water that the audience had never seen a human body do. Dillingham's shows worked. Good Times ran for 456 performances from 1920 to 1921. Better Times ran for 405 in 1922 and 1923. But worked is relative. The Hippodrome's overhead meant that even sold-out runs barely broke even. And Marceline, the clown from opening night, the man in the bad suit who had played the Hippodrome for 9 consecutive seasons, who had once been so famous that parents brought their children from across the country to see him, Marceline had left the theater by 1915. He tried restaurants. He tried real estate. He went back to circus clowning, just another performer doing walkarounds with Ringling Brothers. Silent film had changed what audiences wanted from physical comedy. The public that had adored him simply stopped. In 1922, the Hippodrome's elephants, the ones who had been there since opening night, the Powers dancing elephants, 4 animals named Lena, Jenny, Ada, and Lou, were sent uptown to the Bronx's Royal Theater. A stage worker named Miller Renard remembered the borough president of the Bronx throwing them a dinner on the lawn of the Chamber of Commerce. Special menus were printed. Each elephant had a bale of hay. The place was mobbed with people. The elephants marched up the steps to their places at the table. The stalls under the Hippodrome stage were empty now. Dillingham left in 1923. E.F. Albee of the Keith Albee vaudeville circuit took over and hired the architect Thomas W. Lamb to gut the interior. Lamb built a smaller stage. He discarded the water tank. He stripped out everything that had made the Hippodrome and turned it into a vaudeville house with a movie screen. The seating dropped by 400. The organ was a mid-Merloche, 2 manuals, 5 ranks, later enlarged to 3 manuals and 7. Harry Houdini played the remodeled house, though his most famous Hippodrome performance had occurred 5 years earlier. On January 7, 1918, during the run of a revue called Cheer Up, Houdini had walked an elephant named Jenny onto the stage. She was 8 feet tall and weighed somewhere between 6 and 10,000 pounds, depending on who told the story. She wore a blue ribbon around her neck and a large wristwatch on her leg. Houdini led her into a cabinet built to look like a circus wagon. 30 men used a block and tackle to turn the cabinet to face the audience. Houdini fired a pistol. The front and back of the cabinet opened. The elephant was gone. 5,200 people saw it, or thought they did. Critics pointed out that the Hippodrome's semicircular seating meant that only those sitting directly in front could verify the disappearance. Everyone else took Houdini's word. To this day, no one knows how he did it. The engagement lasted 19 weeks, the longest run of Houdini's career, but by 1925, the vaudeville was dying too. Movies were added to the bill. Newer, more glamorous movie palaces. The Roxy opened in 1927 with 5,920 seats, and none of the Hippodrome's backstage headaches were pulling audiences away. Keith Albee merged into RKO by May 1928. In December 1929, the developer Fred F. French purchased the Hippodrome for $7.5 million. He announced plans to erect an 83-story skyscraper on the site, just 200 feet shorter than the Empire State Building. The New York Times put the announcement on the front page. The critic Haywood Brown, a member of the Algonquin Round Table, wrote a nostalgic column that began with a piece of advice for the builders. Look carefully before you start to see whether any elephants have been left on the premises. The stock market had crashed 2 months earlier. French's skyscraper was never built. The Hippodrome sat dark. It reopened in 1933 as the New York Hippodrome Cinema, showing movies in a space built for cavalry charges. In 1935, the producer Billy Rose leased the building for a Rodgers and Hart circus musical called Jumbo, starring Jimmy Durante. The marquee read, "Bigger than a show, better than a circus." Reviews were favorable. It ran for about 5 months, then closed. The Great Depression did not support exclamation points. During the run of Jumbo, someone had the idea to bring the Powers elephants back. The original trainer, William Power, had died in 1920. but his wife Jeanette had kept the act going on the vaudeville circuit. The elephants returned to the Hippodrome and, according to witnesses, trumpeted and squealed with recognition when they entered the building. Then they discovered that, after all the theater's conversions, the space was much smaller and less hospitable for animals. The crowd was indifferent. The elephants were described as lackadaisical. They left the building with Mrs. Power and were taken to an estate in Nyack, New York. The Hippodrome had outlasted its ability to astonish even the animals that had once defined it. After Jumbo, the Hippodrome became a boxing venue. Mike Jacobs of the 20th Century Sporting Club put on wrestling matches and, in 1938, introduced Jai Alai to New York City. Jacobs kept an office inside the theater and, according to the New Yorker, had annexed a hideaway in the ladies' powder room where he could escape the crowds. By 1939, a guide to the World's Fair listed the Hippodrome simply as a professional Jai Alai venue, the only one in the city. At the end of June 1939, Citibank Farmers Trust Company gave notice to every tenant on 6th Avenue between 43rd and 44th. Leases would not be renewed. Vacate before September 1st. The bank planned to build a row of low-rise taxpayer stores, cheap construction with high profit margins, enough to cover the property taxes until someone figured out what to really do with the land. Jacobs moved his operation to the Brill Building by mid-July. The Hippodrome closed on August 16, 1939. A headline in the Brooklyn Eagle read, "The Hip comes down. Bricks to start tumbling today, but there'll be some folks who won't believe it." The demolition happened. The lot sat empty. Weeds grew where the stage had been. The site was used for a while as a bus depot. World War II delayed redevelopment. For more than a decade, one of the most valuable blocks in Midtown Manhattan was a parking lot. In 1944, 5 years after the Wrecking Ball, Leonard Bernstein's musical On the Town opened on Broadway. There's a number called Come Up to My Place, in which a sailor named Chip uses a tourist guidebook to navigate Manhattan. The guidebook is hopelessly out of date. Chip wants to visit the Hippodrome. The joke is that it no longer exists. In 1952, the architects Elie Jacques Kahn and Robert Allen Jacobs put up an aluminum and glass office building on the site, owned by Edison Properties. The address is 1120 Avenue of the Americas. There is a large format photograph of the original theater in the lobby. That is it. That is all that was saved. A picture. Except it wasn't all. In 2010, construction workers excavating the basement for a renovation of the building's central air system found a 100-square-foot patch of the original bricks that had lined the floor of the Hippodrome's stage. The bricks had been buried when the theater was torn down 71 years earlier. They were carefully removed and saved. The workers also found a metal gaff with a wooden handle, a stagehand's tool for manipulating curtains and heavy drapery, and in the lower-level parking garage, still affixed to a masonry wall behind rows of parked cars, there is an iron ring. It has been there for over a century. The basement-level stables of the theater once stood in that spot. The ring is a horse hitch. Marceline, the clown from opening night, the man who walked on stage in sloppy evening clothes and an opera hat and said nothing and made thousands laugh. Marceline, whose act Charlie Chaplin had seen as an 11-year-old boy at the London Hippodrome in 1901 and would later describe in vivid detail, whose costume of genteel clothes badly tailored presaged the tramp's own wardrobe. Marceline ended up in a room at the Hotel Mansfield in Manhattan. The date was November 5, 1927. He had $6 to his name. He had pawned his diamond ring 2 days earlier for $15. He laid out photographs of himself from his years at the Hippodrome on the bed. His first shot went into the wall. His second did not miss. The hotel manager said that in the months before his death, no one had telephoned Marceline, no mail had arrived, and he never smiled or complained. The largest wreath at his funeral came from Charlie Chaplin. The water tank, the 60-foot glass basin where cavalry horses once swam through simulated lakes, where Annette Kellerman once dove through a waterfall in front of 5,000 people, where chorus girls walked down an incline and disappeared beneath the surface as though swallowed by the stage itself. The tank was drained when Thomas Lamb remodeled the house in 1923. It was filled in, built over, and eventually jackhammered into rubble along with everything else in August 1939. Today, if you stand at 1120 Avenue of the Americas and look up, you see a building that does not ask to be looked at. Tourists walk past it on their way to Bryant Park or Times Square. They don't stop. 2 floors below the street, behind parked cars and a concrete garage, the iron ring waits in the wall where the elephants used to stand.